In 1162, a boy was born with a blood clot clutched in his tiny fist, a child who would grow up eating wild onions and marmots to survive. That starving orphan would one day command an empire larger than Rome at its peak, Alexander's conquests and Napoleon's Europe combined. One man's DNA is found in 16 million living descendants today. That's 0.5% of all men on Earth. His armies would erase entire civilizations from history, yet create the first truly global economy. By the end of this video, you'll understand how a homeless nomad boy became the most successful conqueror in human history, why his name still triggers primal fear 800 years later, and the shocking truth about his legacy that historians don't want you to know. You'll discover the secret military innovation that made 100,000 horsemen unstoppable against millions, why he deliberately murdered 1.75 million people in a single city and considered it mercy, the hidden law code that transformed barbaric tribes into history's most efficient empire. How did orphan Temüjin survive being enslaved with a wooden collar around his neck? What was the arrow message that triggered the annihilation of an empire? Why did Genghis Khan's own generals fear him more than death itself? Here are 3 statistical impossibilities. He controlled more land than any empire before industrialization. His campaigns killed 11% of the entire world population. He created the first intercontinental free trade zone. How does a boy named Temüjin, meaning iron worker, become Genghis Khan, the universal ruler? To understand how one man reshaped the planet, we need to go back to the frozen steppes of 1162, where survival itself was a daily war. Picture the Mongolian steppe, winters plunging to -40 degrees Fahrenheit, where tribal warfare was breakfast and Chinese manipulation was dinner. No cities, no agriculture, just endless grass seas where only the strongest survived another sunrise. Meet the players in young Temüjin's tragedy. Yesugei the brave, his father, poisoned by Tatars when Temüjin was 9. Khorazm the fierce, a mother who kept her 5 children alive on roots and rodents after their tribe abandoned them. Jebe, the blood brother Temüjin's childhood friend, who would become his greatest enemy. Berta the wise, the girl who would be kidnapped on their wedding night and birth an empire from her suffering. The steppes operated on simple rules: raid or be raided, kill or be killed. Chinese dynasties had perfected keeping nomads weak-arm one tribe to destroy another, ensure eternal warfare. Into this world of betrayal and blood feuds, Temüjin was born, marked by prophecy, but cursed by circumstance. His father's death should have meant the end. The Temüjin tribe didn't just abandon the family, they actively hunted them. At 16, Temüjin was captured, locked in a wooden collar like livestock. But here's what the history books won't tell you. When he escaped by smashing his captor's skull with that same wooden collar, something fundamental changed. The boy who had begged for scraps became something else, something terrifying. But first came more disasters. The Merkits stole his wife Berta, leaving him with 7 followers and a heart full of rage. When he got her back, she was pregnant. Lesser men would have rejected her. Temüjin declared the child his heir. This wasn't compassion, it was calculation. He was already thinking beyond tradition, beyond the steppes. Your father climbed high and flew far, his mother Khorazm told him after another near-death escape, but flying wolves fall hardest. She was wrong. This wolf would teach the world that some falls are just the beginning of flight. But how does a teenage exile with 7 followers challenge warlords commanding thousands? The blood brotherhood with Jebe brought Temüjin his first real power: 20,000 warriors who remembered his father. But alliances on the steppes were written in sand, not stone. When the Merkits kidnapped Berta, it triggered more than a rescue. It launched a revolution. The raid to reclaim her showed Temüjin's emerging genius. Instead of traditional steppe tactics, he coordinated multiple forces, used intelligence networks, and struck with mathematical precision. The Merkits expected wild cavalry charges. They got systematic annihilation. But here's where Temüjin broke every rule of steppe warfare. He promoted based on merit, not birth. Jebe, a blacksmith's son, became a general. Orphans he adopted commanded thousands. He organized his growing forces in decimal units, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, creating history's first modular army. The enemies circling him represented the old order. The Temüjin commanded 30,000 warriors and wanted revenge for their murdered kinsmen. The Tatars, his father's killers, fielded 70,000 of the steppe's best warriors. The Naimans controlled the western grasslands with 100,000 riders. The Karaits, Christian Mongols, could summon 200,000. Then came the moment that would echo through 8 centuries of nightmares. The split with Jamuka. 2 ideologies collided. Jamuka's aristocratic tradition versus Temujin's meritocracy. When they separated, both claimed the title of Khan. The steppes couldn't hold 2 sons. Temüjin introduced psychological warfare that would become his signature. When he captured Temüjin nobles who had enslaved him, he didn't just kill them. He boiled them alive slowly while their armies watched. The message was clear. Opposition meant not death, but hell. His military innovations accelerated. Each warrior maintained 5 horses, switching mounts to maintain impossible speeds. They could cover 100 miles daily, when European armies managed 20. Every man carried 60 arrows and could shoot 6 per minute at full gallop. Their composite bows, made from horn, sinew and wood, could punch through armor at 350 yards. Modern military academies still can't explain how he did this, transformed undisciplined raiders into the ancient world's most disciplined force. The answer was simple and terrifying. He made them believe they were destiny incarnate. By 1206, the fragments were ready to become an avalanche. In 1206, at the source of the Onon River, the last free tribes gathered for a fight that would determine whether Asia would have 1 Khan or 1,000. Days 1 through 3 of the Great Kurultai saw tension thick enough to cut. Temujin's white banner flew beside Jamuka's black one as the tribes gathered, Naimans from the west, Karaits from the south, scattered clans choosing sides. Then something happened that defied 4,000 years of military logic. Temujin's shaman, Kokochu, declared him chosen by the eternal blue sky itself. A pattern interrupt in steppe politics, divine mandate trumping traditional selection. The Naimans struck first, attempting a night attack across the Khwarazm River. But Temujin had placed scouts in patterns no steppe warlord had imagined, concentric circles extending 20 miles. The Mongols knew every enemy movement before it began. What followed was the Khwarazm River deception. Temujin's forces retreated in apparent disorder, drawing the Naimans into prepared killing grounds. The Naiman prince Taiyang realized too late. His 100,000 warriors had charged into a closing claw. In 6 hours, 40,000 Mongols destroyed a force more than twice their size. But this wasn't typical steppe slaughter. Temujin's decimal system proved its worth. Units wheeled and struck with mechanical precision, each commander knowing exactly his role in the larger dance of death. But then came the moment that would haunt every civilization for centuries. Jamuka's own generals, seeing the future written in Naiman blood, brought their leader to Temujin bound. The blood brothers faced each other for the last time. "Kill me without spilling blood," Jamuka requested, as befits a Khan. Temujin offered brotherhood, shared rule. Jamuka refused. There can only be 1 sun in the sky, 1 Khan on the steppes. His back was broken, his eyes watching the eternal blue sky as life left them. With Jamuka dead, the tribes bowed. The exile became Genghis Khan universal ruler, but ruling the steppes wasn't enough. The hunger that had gnawed at a starving boy now gnawed at an empire. The military revolution was complete. Light cavalry comprised 60% of his force, each archer a mobile artillery platform with their 350-yard range composite bows. Heavy cavalry, the remaining 40%, wore Chinese-style lamellar armor and carried lances for shock assault. Each warrior maintained discipline that would make Romans jealous: death for breaking formation, death for looting before ordered, death for showing mercy without permission. The math was beautiful in its lethality. A tumen of 10,000 could loose 60,000 arrows per minute. At Khwarazm River, They'd fired 1.8 million arrows in the first half hour. The Naimans died in calculated waves. Shisha became the first foreign target, a test run for the world conquest about to begin. The Tangut kingdom controlled Silk Road choke points and had played steppe politics for centuries. They were about to learn that the game had new rules written in blood. But conquering the steppes was child's play compared to what came next. The Mongols were about to face Chinese walls that had stood for 1,000 years. The Yellow River diversion seemed brilliant: flood the Mongol camp, drown the horsemen. But Genghis Khan learned faster than any commander in history. When the waters receded, Chinese engineers found themselves with new employers. The Mongols had just acquired siege warfare. But then something happened that defied logic. Genghis Khan accepted tribute and moved on. Shisha became a vassal, their engineers and knowledge absorbed. This wasn't mercy. This was preparation for the real prize, the Jin dynasty. 2 million Jin soldiers faced 100,000 Mongols. The numbers suggested comedy, not conquest. The Jin had ruled northern China for centuries. Their Great Wall improved and extended, their armies the region's most sophisticated. At Badger's Mouth Pass, mathematics replaced muscle. The Jin sent 500,000 troops through the narrow valley. Mongol engineers, former Jin engineers, had calculated angles of fire, kill zones, retreat paths. In 2 days, 30,000 Mongols eliminated 500,000 enemies. Bodies piled so high they formed new walls. This next part changed warfare forever. Chinese defectors brought the Mongols gunpowder, not for fireworks or signals, but for psychological annihilation. The thundering sky god seemed to fight for Genghis Khan. Beijing fell after Jin troops realized a terrible truth. Their generals were more afraid of the emperor than the Mongols. Defenders defected en masse. When the city fell, Genghis Khan ordered total extermination, except for engineers and craftsmen. The Mongols were learning civilization by consuming it. The numbers stagger belief. 9 million dead in northern China. Entire provinces depopulated. Agricultural land returned to grassland paradise for nomads. But Genghis had learned something in those frozen winters that no emperor understood. You could rule graveyards as easily as cities. Here's where our story turns from conquest to apocalypse. The Khorazm Empire stretched from Persia to India, 400,000 professional soldiers defending ancient cities. Their fatal mistake came wrapped in silk and greed. Governor Inalchuk of Otrar saw 450 Mongol traders and thought easy profit. He murdered them all, stole their goods. When Genghis sent ambassadors demanding justice, the Shah had them beheaded. One survived, head shaved in humiliation, to carry the message back. What happened next sounds like fantasy, but we have the Persian records. Genghis Khan climbed a mountain, removed his hat, and prayed for 3 days. When he descended, he spoke words that would echo through history. I am the punishment of God. If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you. The force comparison seemed favorable to Khorazm, 400,000 defenders versus 200,000 Mongols, but the Shah had never faced an enemy who thought in systems, not battles. Genghis divided his forces, unthinkable in traditional warfare. Multiple armies struck simultaneously across thousands of miles. Cities expecting reinforcement found only more Mongols. The Shah's forces couldn't concentrate without exposing other cities. They were being dismantled like a machine, piece by piece. Otrar fell first. Governor Inalchuk, who started this horror, had molten silver poured into his eyes and ears, a fortune becoming torture. But this was mercy compared to what followed. At Bukhara, Islam's holy city, Genghis Khan rode his horse into the main mosque. Books became horse feed. He gathered the city's leaders and delivered a speech preserved in trembling detail. Your sins must be great indeed for God to send me. I am his scourge. Obey and live as slaves. Resist and cease to exist. The city obeyed. 1.75 million people died anyway, not from rage, but calculation. Terror was a tool, precisely applied. Other cities would hear Bukhara's fate and surrender immediately. In Genghis Khan's mathematics, killing one city completely saved, attacking 10. Samarkand, jewel of Central Asia, lasted 3 days. Persian historians describe pyramids of severed heads sorted by gender and age bookkeeping of brutality. The Mongols had turned killing into administration. But then the Shah made his last mistake. He fled. Genghis sent generals Jebe and Subutai with 20,000 riders on history's longest pursuit. They chased him to the Caspian Sea, where he died on a barren island, possibly of pleurisy, certainly of despair. Merv's extinction remains history's single bloodiest day. Each Mongol warrior received a quota, 300 to 400 executions. They worked in shifts. The killing took 13 days. When Persian scholars returned years later, they counted skulls, 1.75 million. The irrigation system, maintained for millennia, was destroyed. The desert reclaimed civilization. Statistical shock requires repetition. 15 million dead in 2 years across the Khorazm Empire. The Mongols had killed more people than existed in many countries. This wasn't war, it was erasure. Subutai's reconnaissance in force reached Europe. At Legnica, European knights in their finest armor met Mongol mobility and died in droves. But then, Genghis Khan died, drunk in his palace. The Mongols withdrew for succession selection, and Europe drew breath it didn't deserve. Medieval maps labeled the steppes, "Here live the demons of Tartarus." They weren't wrong. The wolf had shown his teeth to the world. Genghis Khan had built an empire of bones stretching from sunrise to sunset, but death comes even to the world conqueror. In 1227, the aging Khan returned to Mongolia, but unfinished business pulled him back. Xixia had rebelled. During this final campaign, death finally caught the uncatchable. Fall from horse, arrow wound, a captured princess's poison needle in bed. Accounts differ, but the end was the same. As Genghis Khan lay dying, he gave one final order so terrible that the men who heard it would take it to their graves literally. The funeral procession to Mongolia became a march of death. Every living thing encountered was killed. Go serve your Khan in the next world. The burial itself was masterwork paranoia. 40 maidens were sacrificed to serve him. The 1,000 soldiers who dug the grave were killed by another unit, who were themselves eliminated. A river was diverted over the site. Horses trampled the ground until no trace remained. The location would die with its creators. The empire immediately convulsed. Genghis, the chosen heir, faced challenges from his brothers. But Genghis had built better than he knew. The system survived its creator. The decimal military structure held. The Yasa law code continued. Most remarkably, the religious tolerance law remained. Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, all protected equally under Mongol rule. Statistical aftermath staggers comprehension. 40 million dead, roughly 11% of the world's population, 12 million square miles under Mongol control. But the constructive statistics matter too. The Silk Road, protected by Mongol law, became history's safest trade route. The first international postal system, the YAM, connected Dublin to Beijing. Technologies flowed, gunpowder west, printing east, navigation everywhere. The transformation was beginning. Destroyers were becoming builders. The Mongol peace, enforced by terror, but real in effect, created the first global economy. A European could travel to China with a single passport, protected by the Khan's word. Trade flourished where blood had flowed. But hidden in this success was catastrophe. The same roads that carried silk and spices carried fleas. The Black Death, originating in Mongol territories, would travel their trade routes to kill 1/3 of Europe. Genghis Khan's final posthumous campaign claimed victims centuries after his death. The 4 Khanates Yuan in China, Ilkhanate in Persia, Golden Horde in Russia, Chagatai in Central Asia, each dwarfed Rome, but fragmentation had begun. The wolf pack would scatter, though each wolf remained deadly. The wolf of the steppe was dead, but his howl would echo through 8 centuries. The immediate legacy defies superlatives. Largest contiguous land empire in human history, a record that stands unbroken. Grandson Kublai completed China's conquest, establishing the Yuan dynasty and hosting Marco Polo. Tamerlane would claim descent and unleash another wave of conquest. The Mughal emperors of India traced their lineage to the Khan. Modern Mongolia's population remains smaller than during Genghis Khan's reign, the ultimate historical irony. But the genetic legacy proves more enduring than any monument. E-chromosome studies confirm the impossible. 16 million living men descend from one 13th century man. No emperor, prophet, or philosopher impacted human DNA like this illiterate nomad. The historical debate rages, monster or unifier. Hitler and Stalin studied his techniques and deemed them too extreme, history's villains calling history's conqueror excessive. Yet he established international law, religious freedom, and meritocracy centuries before the Enlightenment. Was he a necessary evil for human progress? Without Mongol conquests, technologies would have remained isolated. The Renaissance partly resulted from Eastern knowledge flowing west. Global trade, cultural exchange, even the concept of diplomatic immunity, all have Mongol origins. Modern revelations keep coming. Climate scientists found global cooling in the 13th century. Reforestation from depopulation actually lowered Earth's temperature. DNA studies reveal migration patterns following Mongol conquests. Ground-penetrating radar searches for his tomb continue, though most Mongolians prefer it stay hidden. The philosophical question persists. How does individual will alter history's trajectory? One abused orphan's rage reshaped continents. If Temüjin had died in slavery, would modernity exist? These aren't just academic questions. They probe whether history has direction or just momentum. That blood clot in a baby's fist wasn't just prophecy. It was a promise written in DNA that would reshape the human species. The nomad who owned nothing created the first global economy. The illiterate warrior wrote laws still influencing us. The destroyer became history's most unlikely creator. The wolf of the steppe sleeps now in an unmarked grave, but when 16 million men look in the mirror, Genghis Khan looks back. His empire crumbled, but his genetic empire expands daily. 8 centuries later, we live in the world his sword carved. The Mongol peace ended, but globalization, his true legacy, defines our age. In the end, the orphan-eating roots got his revenge on a cosmic scale, not just against his enemies, but against death itself. Genghis Khan achieved the only immortality that matters, living forever in humanity's blood and nightmares alike. The wolf still howls, and the world still trembles at the sound.